Hey everybody, welcome to the History of New Media Art. I'm your instructor, Jackie Gleisner, and today we'll be taking a closer look at the ways that videos have been integrated into larger installations. We will be connecting these installations to the broader theme of surveillance as well. Before we get started, let's look back to the previous lecture on personal narrative in video. Let's highlight a few of the examples we saw. First, we learned how an early near-death experience led Bill Viola to rely on the theme of water, as well as spiritual iconography found in Buddhism and Christianity. We also previewed a few examples of second-generation feminist video works. And lastly, we saw how artists build on their own personal narratives to make meaning and explore identity. As I mentioned, today we are looking at how single-channel video evolves into ambitious installations. So far, we have been talking a lot about the different themes and ideas that artists expressed in their videos. And in this presentation, we will take a closer look at how these works were displayed. As video became an increasingly prominent and legitimate form of art, many artists began to consider more ambitious ways of presenting their works. By controlling the total environments where their video works were exhibited, artists can influence more of the senses simultaneously. There is a long historical precedent for creating a total environment or installation-based interaction with a work of art. From polyptychs to contemporary site-specific works, artists have used total environments to engage audiences in new ways. This slide shows several images of different panels that were part of Matthias Grunewald's Isenheim altarpiece from circa 1512 to 1516. This work was created to be placed at the monastery of St. Anthony in Isenheim. The Antonine monks of the monastery looked after people suffering from the plague and other skin diseases. The image of the crucified Christ contains sores to convey empathy to the afflicted. The imagery on the panel was meant for a very specific audience and for a specific environment. If you took contemporary art history with me last semester, you may recall other examples that we viewed of artists considering environment in a very deliberate way, such as Krzysztof Wojcicki's public projection at the Hirshhorn Museum of Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C. Spanning the 68-foot side of the building, the projection hinted at issues that were relevant during the 1980s, some of which remain topical in the present day. The work was a commentary on political rhetoric, reproductive rights, the death penalty, as well as the power of mass media. Wojcicki's work is a nice segue to one of the themes we are going to look at today, how artists began to use installations as a way to probe the idea of surveillance. We will look at several artists today, listed here for your convenience. Interest in surveillance arose when the public became aware that such practices were indeed taking place. Also, the very nature of television heightened interest in the topic. A TV seems to be watching the people who are in fact watching it. Video installations responded to these notions while allowing viewers and audiences to play a more active role within the works. Viewers became part of the performances, but unlike happenings, oftentimes the viewers did not encounter these video installations with the hope or expectation that they would become part of the work. Surveillance has been an interest to artists since the birth of video technology, and the prevalence of reality TV shows even today is evidence of this continued trend as well as the interest from viewers. Remember Vito Acconci's piece, Following Piece? Acconci followed a person at random until he or she had arrived at their destination. The performance was documented and it took place over the course of a month in New York City, meaning that Acconci followed many unsuspecting people as part of this performance. This work shows how artists were thinking about the idea of being watched and the paranoia that comes from that feeling. Media theorist Thomas Levin weighed in on this topic, stating, "Now more than ever we are under surveillance. When we use a credit card or an ATM, when we call on our cell phones or use EasyPass, when we surf the web or simply walk down the street, we leave traces." Almost all of your actions online are traced, and because of the ubiquity of cameras on traffic signals and affixed to buildings, you are often being watched, perhaps more than you realize. With surveillance and installation in mind, let's turn our attention now to the artists working at the nexus of these ideas. We'll begin with Wolf Wollstell, a German artist whose works we have seen before in this course. We have seen from past lectures that the single-channel video and video installations were developed in tandem. As soon as video emerged, artists were envisioning ways to use it within installations. Wollstell's décollage works would be considered an installation today because he used multiple screens and they were arranged in a very specific manner. Thus, the material form of the work took a backseat to the idea behind the work, a concept that American art critic Lucy Lippard later expounded upon, calling this notion, quote, the dematerialization of the object of art. Like many of the artists we have seen in this course, Wollstell was influenced by the ideas of Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp has declared ready-made objects as art, and the futurist declared noises as art. It is an important characteristic of my efforts and those of my colleagues to declare as art the total event, comprising noise, object, movement, color, and psychology, a merging of elements so that life, man, can be art. Another name you should recognize from past presentations and the textbook is Nam June Paik. We already know that Paik is often credited as the father of video art, and his contributions to the field of new media art are immense, thanks to his persistent desire to innovate and embed technology into his artistic practice. In the past, we have examined Paik's connection with the Fluxus Group, and we looked at some of his videos that were part of the Flux film anthology. Today, we are emphasizing how many of his works involved multiple screens within the context of a larger installation. This slide shows Paik's TV Garden. As the viewer enters the space, the viewer becomes aware of the merging of technology and the natural world as television screens flicker from behind plants and foliage. By the 1980s, Paik was constructing enormous installations. Some involved hundreds of TV screens as well as neon lighting, such as this work, titled Electronic Superhighway. With over 300 TV screens contributing to a map of the United States outlined in colored neon lights, this work reflects the geographic boundaries and cultural interior of this country. Within the neon state lines, the TV screens show footage that corresponds to the mythology of that particular state. For example, Kansas contains footage from the iconic film The Wizard of Oz. This work, which has been housed at the Smithsonian Museum of Art in Washington, D.C. since 2002, is at once a celebration of the freedom and access of information, as well as a more critical statement on the difficulty of making sense of so much information. Now let's look at installations and videos in the works of Japanese artist Shigeku Kubota. A key figure in the Japanese avant-garde scene, Kubota was showing her work in Tokyo when the leader of the Fluxus Group, George Macunis, beseeched her to move to New York City. In New York, Kubota met and married another artist involved with the Fluxus Group, named June Paik. For the Fluxus Summer Festival in 1965, Kubota created Vagina Painting, seen here. You can see from this image that Kubota is in fact making a painting, but she's not using her hands to hold the paintbrush. This work was a retort to the male-dominated abstract expressionism movement in the United States, as well as Yves Klein's use of women as living paintbrushes to create his Anthropometrie series of works of art on paper in 1960, a series that we discussed in Contemporary Art History. In 1976, Kubota made another work inspired by a different male artist. Nude Descending a Staircase borrows from Duchamp's 1912 Cubist painting of the same name, but in Kubota's work she uses 4 television monitors installed on the risers of a wooden staircase, each transmitting images of real nudes descending a staircase. This slide shows the two works together, so you can compare Duchamp's 1912 painting with Kubota's installation from 1976. What do you think Duchamp would have thought of her work? Let's look now at another example of a video artist reinterpreting a famous work of art. Ray Rapp's Fur Rap from 1997 shows a video of an artist sweating, viewed from inside a TV set wrapped in fur. This work references Merritt Oppenheim's Object from 1936. The impetus for this work came from a joke. At lunch with Dora Maar and Pablo Picasso, Oppenheim's bracelet caught Picasso's eye. Her bracelet was lined with fur, and Oppenheim quipped that anything could be lined with fur, even the cup and saucer that were before them on the table. Soon after, Oppenheim had created Object, one of the most infamous surrealist objects, notable for its ability to take on a mundane object, one known for its feminine refinement, and transform it into a strange sculpture that defied reason. In a similar twist of functionality, Ray Rapp made TV furniture in 1997. The so-called furniture served no function in this installation by this American contemporary artist. At Les Levine's first installation at the Art Gallery of Toronto, the work called Slipcover from 1967 showed viewers recorded images of themselves on a series of monitors. It created an eerie feeling, and it raised awareness about the notions of surveillance. Please watch the short excerpt linked on this slide. An early adopter of single-channel video, Bruce Nauman also made installations that heightened a viewer's awareness of their own physical limitations, and he coupled this with installations and video. Please watch the short excerpt on this slide. Here's what art critic Margaret Morse had to say after seeing Bruce Nauman's video Corridor. To me, it was as if my body had become unglued from my own image, as if the ground of my orientation in space were pulled out from under me. In a similar work titled Corridor Installation from 1970, a series of walls divided the Nicholas Wilder galleries in Los Angeles into 6 passages, but only half of them were actually passable. Visitors attempted to go through the maze, were taped from behind, and their images were then projected on monitors throughout the passages. In Peter Campus's work Negative Crossing, which was exhibited at Bryce Wolkowitz Gallery in New York in 1974, visitors were taped performing actions in front of a mirror. This footage was then projected onto large screens. Dieter Frost's work, Not a Model for Big Brother's Spy Cycle from 1987, made use of a closed-circuit television with a pre-taped video. Viewers were taped as they entered the room as they watched others being interviewed about their political activities. And Sophie Cahl's The Shadow from 1985 recalls Vito Acconci's following piece, which we reviewed at the beginning of this lecture. The artist asked her mother to hire a detective to follow her, report on her activities, and provide photographic evidence of her existence. In Jordan Crandall's Drive, there were 7 films which combined traditional cinematography with military target finding technology, tracking systems, and pattern recognition programs. And finally, Julia Schur explored the dynamics of power associated with surveillance by bringing it to a museum, where visitors were able to make prints of their own images or of images of others that appeared on the monitors in her work titled Security by Julia from 1990. Through a wide range of works, today we have seen how interest in surveillance accompanied and enriched video installations. As the public became aware that surveillance practices were being employed by governments around the world, artists began to explore this theme in their own artworks. Video installations responded to the idea of being watched and the cacophony of information during the 20th century, continuing to the present. Surveillance has been an interest to artists since the birth of video technology, and today we have seen how it has been a topic ripe for exploration. Thanks for sticking with me. See you all soon.